Hello. In connection with my 1901 project, where I am reading works all sort of 10 years before and 10 years after 1901, which was the year my grandfather was born, I picked up The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle, which was published in 1901. Also, coincidentally, this is a part of, I guess this is sort of buddy up with the Holmes is Where the Heart Is, which is a event going on in BookTube at the moment where people are reading works of Arthur Conan Doyle. This video is only about one name in The Hound of the Baskerville. This is definitely me being, I just want to focus on one thing and think about it. Maybe start to dig around a bit, which is The Hound of the Baskerville, the curse of the Baskervilles, being hunted by a hellhound. Dr. Mortimer comes to Holmes and Watson with this mystery, this problem, this what are they gonna do? Gotta figure out what happened to Sir Charles Baskerville and maybe perhaps prevent the doom of Henry Baskerville. And in this, he says he's come to Holmes as the second greatest expert in Europe, and Holmes is like, okay, well, who's the first? Who's the first expert? Who's the highest? And he says Brtlln. And it is that name that I would like to dwell upon in this video. Alphonse Brtlln, actual personage, lived from 1853 to 1914, was a French police officer and biometrics researcher, creator of an ID system based on physical measurements, created the mugshot. Here is him in his mugshots. He is Florida man. Here is the fellow who is responsible for that. He also had, he did multiple measurements to try and identify criminals, because up until that point, it was impossible to track people very efficiently, and you would have repeat offenders who would just give different names and stuff like that, and there was no way to kind of track them. He also came up with ideas on preserving footprints, ballistics, the crime scene photography, a lot of the start of a lot of police forensics of how to track down the truth. So indeed, it seems like, okay, Doyle is pointing out maybe a real life, if Sherlock Holmes is kind of the uber, I think you could argue still is the uber detective, police detective, or the scientific detective, fictionally, then Alphonse Brtlln, especially at this time, could be considered the great originator of actual authorities using science to get the bad guy and stuff like that. Except that there. Looking into Alphonse Brtlln, he is one of his things. At the moment, I'm at the Wikipedia stage. I will freely admit I'm at the Wikipedia stage of my knowledge on this. Is he's known for his testimony in the Dreyfus affair, in two trials of Alfred Dreyfus, who was a French captain in the French military, who was accused of passing secrets to the Germans. And what happened was that Alphonse Brtlln had testified in two trials, an 1894 trial and an 1899 trial, testified as a handwriting expert, which he was not, and claimed that Dreyfus had written the incriminating document in that case. But he wasn't a handwriting expert, and his flawed evidence contributed to the conviction of a significant factor in the conviction of the innocent Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer who had suffered a lot of anti-Semitism, and this case just erupted the virulent, deep-seated anti-Semitism in France at the time, kind of split the whole society into Dreyfusards and anti-Dreyfusards in that era. So it is really striking to me that in 1901, even though the story, I think, going by the wiki and my just kind of looking at stuff about at the very end of the story, Holmes invites Watson to a performance of a particular opera star who was performing from like 1888 to 1893, and the wiki says that it was probably the story, the Hound of the Baskerville, is set in sort of the 1889. So that this story is set sort of before the Dreyfus affair, which starts in 1894 and stretches to 1906. So it's striking that in a story set before the Dreyfus affair, we have a character in the story extolling Brtlln as even greater of a scientific detective than Sherlock Holmes himself, but that it's published after 1901, so where his testimony has at the very least come into serious question, if not outright dismissal. It does in the end get completely dismissed as completely having no scientific basis whatsoever, and just, and Dreyfus is indeed exonerated. So it's striking, like, is Doyle pointing up the fallibility, or is he saying, I love the police and here's the greatest policeman, and my fantasy detective who is Sherlock Holmes, is he sort of a reflection of that kind of worshipfulness of the police? Is this a sort of early example of kind of going the comforting fantasy of the all-knowing detective who will be able to find the truth, which is, I mean, it's a part of the kind of the appeal of the mystery, of having a detective who will find the truth, that there is a truth out there to find, and they will find it, and they are at the very least incorruptible. I think of a lot of, even if the private eye gets bashed around, he'll still stick doggedly to the truth and what's right. Whereas you get someone like Alphonse Brtlln, whose testimony appears to, I am early on in my thing, appears to have been heavily pressured, perhaps, that from higher ups who really did not want this Jewish officer in their ranks, did not like having Jewish people in the French army in general, and wanted to rid themselves of them. So they pressured this expert to give testimony in an area he was not an expert in, to wrongly convict a fellow. So it's an interesting thing of, like, it's like, I don't know what Conan Doyle's beliefs were. I know that the Dr. Mortimer is somebody who's totally into phrenology, a completely bunkum, discredited science of measuring people's bumps on people's heads to determine their mental traits. He covets Sherlock Holmes's skull, he says, when he meets. And you find out, okay, actually, Arthur Conan Doyle, majorly into phrenology, also into spirituality, of, talking to dead people, fairies, things like that. Sure, Conan Doyle was like this one of these interesting fellows who came up with the scientific detective, and it's like, well, that seems like such an odd irony that somebody who created somebody who's the logical detective would believe in such fantasies. However, I also wonder if someone who could believe in the infallible, all-knowing detective is not actually somebody that's just another fantasy that obviously a popular one, obviously one that really has kind of deep-seated roots in us. It's like it's spawned arguably mysteries, crime dramas. It's like it's a lot of that all springs out of this uber example in Sherlock Holmes. but I find it really interesting to put Brtlln next to Sherlock Holmes and go, oh, do we have kind of messy reality, and then we have the fantasy created very ably and expertly by Arthur Conan Doyle. So yeah, that's my little start of my 1901 reading project. I'm actually going to read a book on the Dreyfus Affair. Ruth Harris, I believe, is the author, to get go a little bit deeper than just the Wikipedia version. But I just thought that was striking just to begin with, and it has sent me off on when reading about Brtlln is like, oh, this is the era of the Dreyfus Affair, fits within my remit of like 1890 to 1910. So it's like, okay, I can explore the Dreyfus Affair, kind of springing out of the mention of this one name in The Hound of the Baskervilles, which that's the kind of fun chasing the threads kind of reading that I love to do, and which is why that's probably the kind of the methodical way I'm going to work, which is completely haphazard, just chasing things that interest me. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.